There's something most people never think about until it's too late. You live on a street with 10, maybe 20 other houses. You wave at your neighbors. You chat at the mailbox. Your kids play together. Everything's fine. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The moment the power goes out and stays out, the social contract that holds all of that together starts to thin. Fast. I'm not saying your neighbors are bad people. Most of them aren't. But desperation changes behavior in ways that are predictable and well documented. And if you're one of the few households on your block that actually prepared, that gap between you and everyone else can become a real problem. Now, I want to be clear about something up front. This isn't about turning against your community or treating everyone around you like an enemy. It's actually the opposite. This is about understanding the dynamics that kick in during a prolonged disruption so you can navigate them intelligently, protect your family, and ideally be part of the solution, rather than a target. No paranoia, no bunker mentality, just honest, practical thinking about how people actually behave when the systems they depend on suddenly disappear. I've been studying this for over a decade, and one of the biggest blind spots I see in the preparedness community is this. People spend hundreds of hours thinking about gear and supplies, but almost no time thinking about the human element. And historically, in every major disaster, it's the human element that creates the most danger. Let's talk about why and what you can actually do about it. 1. The 72-hour window. FEMA's standard guidance tells people to be prepared for 72 hours of self-sufficiency. 3 days. That's the baseline they recommend, because that's roughly how long it takes for organized disaster response to begin reaching affected areas. Here's the problem with that number. Most people aren't even prepared for 72 minutes. A study conducted after Superstorm Sandy found that roughly 40% of affected households had less than a 3-day supply of food and water on hand when the storm hit. Another survey from the Federal Emergency Management Agency's own National Household Survey showed that only about half of American households had set aside supplies for a disaster of any kind. That means half the country is starting from zero when the lights go out. Now, think about what happens on your street. Statistically, about half your neighbors have almost nothing stored. Within the first day, they're going to start feeling it. By day 2, especially if they have kids, elderly parents, or someone with a medical condition, they're going to start looking outward. And that looking outward starts with the people closest to them. That's you. In the first 72 hours, most people are still hopeful. They assume the power's coming back soon. They figure the government is on its way. The mood is inconvenience, not crisis. But right around that 72-hour mark, something shifts. People stop assuming it's temporary and that start realizing it might not be. 2. The psychology of scarcity. There's a well-documented psychological phenomenon that happens when people perceive that essential resources are running out. It's called scarcity mindset. And it fundamentally changes how people think and act. Rational, generous, reasonable people start making decisions based on fear rather than logic. It's not a character flaw. It's a survival mechanism hardwired into the brain. Research published in behavioral science has shown that when people experience resource scarcity, their cognitive bandwidth narrows. They become hyper-focused on the immediate need and lose the ability to think long-term. They make impulsive decisions. They become less cooperative and more competitive. You've seen a mild version of this every time a storm is forecast. The grocery store shelves clear out. People buy 4 times the bread they need. Someone gets into an argument over the last case of water. That's scarcity psychology playing out over bottled water when the taps are still running. Now imagine that same psychology when the taps actually stop. During Hurricane Katrina, accounts from survivors consistently described a shift in community behavior around day 3 to day 5. People who had been friendly and cooperative began hoarding. Theft increased significantly. There were documented cases of armed confrontations between neighbors over basic supplies like food and drinking water. And this wasn't in some remote area. This was in one of the largest cities in the country. The important thing to understand is that this isn't about good people and bad people. Scarcity doesn't care about your character. It overrides it. Parents who would never steal under normal circumstances will do whatever it takes to feed their children. And honestly, you'd probably do the same. The question isn't whether people change under extreme stress. They do. The question is how you position yourself and your family so that you're not caught in the crossfire of that change. 3. Operational security. What you show matters. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see well-meaning preppers make. They tell everyone. They show off their supplies. They run the generator at full volume, while the rest of the block sits in the dark. And then they're surprised when people come knocking. Or worse. There's a concept in the military and intelligence world called operational security, or OPSEC. The basic idea is simple. Control what information about your capabilities and resources is available to others. In a neighborhood context during a blackout, this means being smart about what you reveal. If your house is the only one on the street with lights blazing at 10 o'clock at night during a grid-down scenario, you've just put a spotlight on yourself. You've told everyone within line of sight that you have power, which means you probably have fuel, which means you probably have other supplies too. You've become the most interesting house on the block. The same applies to cooking. If everyone else is eating cold cans and your backyard smells like a barbecue, people notice. If your kids are running around well-fed and hydrated while the rest of the neighborhood kids are cranky and hungry, parents notice. None of this means you shouldn't use your supplies. That's what they're for. But how you use them matters. Use blackout curtains or hang blankets over windows at night if you're running lights. Cook indoors when possible or time your outdoor cooking so it's less conspicuous. Keep your generator sound dampened or switch to solar when you can. A portable power station running quietly inside your house draws zero attention compared to a gas generator roaring in your driveway. That's not just a noise preference, it's a safety strategy. One more thing on this. Be careful about what you've already told people before a crisis happens. If you've spent years telling coworkers and neighbors about your food storage and your backup power systems, that information is out there. You can't take it back. People remember who mentioned they had a generator. People remember who said they keep 6 months of food in the basement. During normal times, that's a conversation starter. During a crisis, it's a map to your front door. 4. The danger of being the only one prepared. Here's the uncomfortable math. If you're the only prepared household on a street of 20 homes, and all 19 of those other households run out of food and water within a week, you now have a serious problem. Not because any one of those families is dangerous individually, but because the collective need is overwhelming. You can't feed 20 families. You can't power 20 houses. You can't provide water for 80 people. And the moment you help one family visibly, every other family knows you have supplies. Now you're not just a neighbor. You're a resource. And resources get consumed. This isn't hypothetical. After major ice storms in the Northeast, there have been documented cases of prepared households being pressured, threatened, and in some cases burglarized by desperate neighbors. During extended blackouts following severe weather events, law enforcement agencies have reported spikes in residential burglaries, particularly targeting homes that appeared to have supplies or power. The math also works in reverse, and this is the key insight. If instead of one prepared household on a street of 20, you have 5 or 6 prepared households, everything changes. The burden is distributed. The desperate to prepared ratio shifts. The community has a functional core that can organize, share strategically, and maintain order. That's why community preparedness matters more than individual preparedness. We'll come back to that. 5. Who actually becomes a threat and why? Let's be honest and specific about this because vague fear isn't useful. In a prolonged grid-down scenario, the people who are most likely to become a problem fall into a few predictable categories. The first is people with substance dependencies. This includes prescription medications, alcohol, and other substances. When someone's supply runs out and withdrawal sets in, behavior can become erratic and unpredictable fast. This isn't a judgment call. It's a medical reality. Withdrawal from certain substances can be life-threatening, and people in that state are not operating rationally. The second is people with untreated or undertreated mental health conditions. Roughly 1 in 5 American adults lives with some form of mental illness, according to data from the National Institute of Mental Health. Many are stable and well managed with medication and support. Remove the medication and the support structure, and some of those individuals become vulnerable, both to themselves and potentially to others. The third is opportunists. Every disaster has them. People who see chaos as a chance to take what they want. They're a small percentage, but they're real. After Hurricane Harvey, the Houston Police Department made hundreds of arrests for looting and burglary in affected neighborhoods. The pattern is consistent across disasters. A small percentage of people exploit the breakdown in normal enforcement. And the fourth, which people don't talk about enough, is groups. Desperate individuals are manageable. Desperate groups are not. When people feel threatened and powerless individually, they form groups. And group dynamics can escalate situations in ways that individual interactions wouldn't. Mob psychology is well documented, and it doesn't require evil intent. It just requires fear, anger, and a crowd. The practical takeaway here isn't to fear everyone around you. It's to think clearly about your specific neighborhood, your specific street, and your specific vulnerabilities. Know your environment the way you know your supply list. 6. Physical security basics most people ignore. Most residential homes in America are not designed for security. They're designed for comfort and aesthetics. Standard interior doors can be kicked in with one solid hit. Most sliding glass doors can be lifted off their tracks. Ground floor windows are entry points that require nothing more than a rock. During normal times, none of this matters because the social contract and the presence of law enforcement keep things in check. During a prolonged outage, especially one that lasts beyond a week, those assumptions start to fail. Response times increase. Officers are redirected to higher priority emergencies. Some areas effectively lose regular patrol coverage entirely. You don't need to turn your house into a fortress, but some basic hardening steps make a significant difference. Reinforcing your entry doors with longer screws in the strike plate is a $5 fix that dramatically increases kick resistance. Security film on ground floor windows doesn't make them unbreakable, but it holds the glass together and buys you critical seconds. Motion-activated solar lights around your property work without grid power and serve as both deterrent and early warning. Simple door and window alarms, the battery-operated kind that cost a few dollars each, give you an audible alert if someone tries to enter while you're sleeping. And honestly, a dog, even a small one that barks, is one of the most effective security systems in existence. Burglars consistently report in surveys that a dog in the home is one of the top deterrents, more effective than alarm systems or cameras. The point isn't to prepare for a siege. The point is to not be the easiest target on your street. Opportunistic crime follows the path of least resistance. A few simple measures move you off that path. 7. Community is your best defense. Here's where this whole conversation comes together. Everything I've talked about so far, the psychology, the operational security, the physical hardening, all of it is secondary to the single most effective strategy for surviving a prolonged disruption: community. I know that might sound contradictory after spending the last several minutes talking about why your neighbors can become a threat, but that's exactly the point. Neighbors who are included in a plan, who have some level of preparedness themselves, and who feel like they're part of a team are dramatically less likely to become adversarial. The research on this is compelling. Studies following major disasters consistently show that neighborhoods with pre-existing social connections and some level of organized preparedness experience less crime, faster recovery, and lower casualty rates than neighborhoods where people were isolated and disconnected. After the 1995 Chicago heatwave that killed over 700 people, researchers found that the single biggest predictor of survival wasn't age or health status. It was social connection. People who knew their neighbors, who checked on each other, who had relationships that extended beyond a wave from the driveway, survived at far higher rates. You don't need to form a formal preparedness group, although that's great if you can. Even simple steps make a difference. Get to know the people on your immediate street. Know who has medical training. Know who has tools. Know who has physical limitations. Know who lives alone. That basic awareness transforms a collection of strangers into something that resembles a team. Have a casual conversation about emergency planning. You don't need to pitch it as doomsday prepping. Frame it around the most likely local risk, whether that's hurricanes, ice storms, wildfires, or earthquakes. Most reasonable people are receptive to that conversation when it's framed practically. If you can get even 2 or 3 neighboring households to keep a basic supply of water and food on hand, and agree to look out for each other during an emergency, you've fundamentally changed the equation. You've gone from being the lone prepared house that everyone targets to being part of a prepared cluster that can support and defend itself. 8. What actually happens when the power comes back on? Here's something people rarely talk about: the aftermath. When the power comes back on and normal life resumes, you still live on that street. The things that happened during the blackout, the arguments, the confrontations, the desperation, those memories don't disappear with the return of electricity. Relationships that broke during a crisis are difficult to repair. Trust that was violated doesn't reset. If you handled the situation by hoarding visibly while others suffered, or by turning people away harshly, or by being aggressive in your security posture, those interactions define your reputation going forward. This is another reason why the community approach works better than the fortress approach. When the lights come back on, the people who helped, who shared wisely, who organized rather than isolated, those are the people whose social standing increases. And in a world where future disruptions are becoming more likely, not less, your reputation in your neighborhood is a form of preparedness in itself. Handle the crisis in a way that you can live with afterward, because you will have to live with it. So where does all of this leave us? If you zoom out and look at these dynamics together, a clear picture emerges. Your supplies keep you alive. Your security keeps you safe. But your community is what keeps everything from falling apart. The people who end up in the best position during a prolonged outage aren't the ones with the biggest stockpile or the highest fence. They're the ones who prepared quietly, maintained good relationships, understood the psychology of crisis, and positioned themselves to be an asset rather than a target. Start with the practical stuff. Reinforce your doors. Get blackout curtains. Build your supplies discreetly. But don't stop there. Meet your neighbors. Have the conversation about emergency planning. Help someone else take their first step toward being prepared. Because here's the truth that runs through all of this. In a real crisis, you don't survive alone. Nobody does. The lone wolf fantasy makes for good movies, but the data is clear. Connected, prepared communities outperform isolated, prepared individuals every single time. Preparedness isn't just about what you have. It's about who you know, how you carry yourself, and whether the people around you see you as a neighbor or a target. You get to influence which one it is, but only if you start now, before the lights go out. I'll see you in the next one.